Gal.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Kunai. It's me, Will, and I am joined by...
It's me, Bish. It's me, guys, as always.
I love the it's a me.
It's a me.
I do that at school all the time, and the kids are like, oh my god, Mario. Anyway, so today we are going to be talking about Princess Connect Redive, aren't we, Bish?
Yeah, we are. Before we get into the main topic of discussion for you new folks, Get Life Podcast Kunai is a monthly anime discussion podcast underneath the Get Life group. Due to the nature of discussion, we can't avoid spoilers of the show that we are going to be watching. And for those that are based off existing pieces of work, whether it's manga, light novel, or some other media form, we're not going to be covering the source material for those. If you'd like to recommend a show for us to watch and make an episode of Kunai, leave a suggestion on our Discord page. That's getlifepodcast.com/Discord. In addition to that, make sure that you guys give us a 5-star rating on iTunes or on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Big thanks to our sponsors, Sugoimart and Crunchyroll, where you can watch this anime. Will, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, man. So, as I was saying, we're going to be talking today about the first season of Princess Connect Redive. This was a 13-episode anime licensed by Crunchyroll. This was originally aired back in the spring of 2020, which, you know, was kind of a, let's just say, a time of turmoil. So it was nice to have a good show like this to watch. It's considered action, adventure, comedy, and fantasy. It was produced by Cygames Pictures. And you're like, wait, Cygames? Who is that? Well, Cygames is the same company that has various games out there, such as Grand Blue Fantasy, the Princess Connect game itself, which is also licensed by Crunchyroll. You should check it out. So, Bish, do you have any kind of questions or anything about the Cygames Pictures studio or anything?
To be honest with you, I don't really know much about Cygames to begin with, other than Grand Blue Fantasy, but that's only through you. Like I said, I didn't know that this was an animation studio. I did not have a clue. So I don't know where they came from completely. They might be new to me. I don't know if they've come from other industry professionals, because that happens sometimes. You know, you get Studio Trigger coming from Gainax and that kind of stuff. So I don't know if it's the same sort of case here.
Well, Cygames is, as I said, a gaming company, mostly in the mobile PC market, you know, gacha type games, card games. Like they're the company that made Shadowverse. They also did Rage of Bahamut, but actually it has its own anime, which is kind of where this stuff kind of started, really. So Mappa actually worked with Cygames to produce the anime for Rage of Bahamut, which is actually really good too. And Cygames decided that they wanted to branch out more because they were already also into music. Like pretty much all their properties, you can buy music CDs and even go to concerts and things like that. So when they decided to, you know, form their own actual animation studio, they kind of teamed up not only with Mappa but also with WIT. So in the actual game that this anime is based off of, the Princess Connect game, the actual in-game animation was made by WIT. So Cygames basically took one of Mappa's studios, the studio they were working with, and its people, and they hired people from WIT, Shaft, A1 Pictures, and a couple other pieces here and there to create this studio. And like if you go and you look at some of their staff and stuff like that, they've worked on a lot of really good shows that had really strong animation, if nothing else.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting that you mentioned A1 Studios, because initially when I was watching this, I kind of felt that it was very A1, if that makes sense, you know, like
no,
it was very reminiscent of that.
That's one of the reasons why I decided to kind of look into where some of the animation crew came from, because I was getting some of those similar vibes. And I'm one of those people that I actually really like A1 Pictures. You know, they're not everyone's favorite, but most of their shows I'm into. Would you like me to go into my first impressions of the show first, or would you like to touch on
I think it would be best if you go into this first impressions and then I'll give mine.
Well, I was already, you know, kind of looking forward to this, just because I'm kind of a Cygames fan. As I said, I already liked the Rage of Bahamut anime, and I've been playing the Grand Blue Fantasy gacha game for a long time now, probably too long. So I was itching to see what else Cygames was gonna come up with, especially with something that they were producing as, you know, their own anime this time around, because they've had, like I said, other partnerships with studios before, and I was kind of let down by the Grand Blue Fantasy anime. So my first impressions of this were very, very positive. You know, I'm a sucker for fantasy. I'm a sucker for, you know, cute girls doing cute things. You know, I'm a sucker for action. You know, this show kind of really did have it all for me. So my first impressions, you know, from the get-go were overwhelmingly positive. But I still kind of had a little bit of apprehension just because, like I said, with that previous experience with the Grand Blue anime before this. So what about you?
When I had this on the suggestions for Kunai, because obviously you suggested it, I didn't know what it was initially because I went in completely blind. So when I hear Princess Connect, I kind of got confused between, for some reason, and forgive me for saying this, but I thought this was like an Idol Master anime. Don't know why. I just felt that it was, like, just by the name alone.
It is kind of an interesting name, Princess Connect Redive.
Like, I got confused between that and Idol Master Cinderella Girls, and I thought we were going to watch that. So then when I first opened it, I was like, what the hell is this? And throughout the first episode, I'm like, are they idols? Like, what is going on? Like, I was genuinely confused. So I had to stop it and then had to look at the wiki for a bit to kind of see what the game is about and what's all of this. And I was like, oh, you know, it's your basic sort of gacha game that has combat elements and is set in another world and that kind of sort of isekai style show. So I continued watching it, and I'll be honest with you, Will, it was a difficult first couple of episodes. And
really?
Yeah, I was not interested in it initially. I was just like, what the hell is this? Like, I looked at it and then I saw certain characters and I was just like, oh, this basically is a ripoff of this show or that show. And it took me out of it. I think maybe it might be because I'm not really that into isekai. I like isekai anime, but there's like, I feel like we've gotten too much. I think like the market is saturated enough. And this came at a time, I don't think I even watched this one simulcasted. I mean, this came at a time during COVID. I don't know. It just felt really weird. Like during that time, during lockdown, I was watching like Konosuba and like all of these other like big isekai anime. And then I saw this. I was like, is this trying to be Konosuba? Is this trying to be all these other shows? I felt something was missing. You know what I mean? Like there's certain tropes initially that I caught from the very beginning. And I was like, okay, how long are we going to get this revealed in the season? Are we going to wait until the end of the season for certain things to be revealed? It was weird because normally in these kinds of shows, if there is a dark secret, you get really hyped throughout the season waiting for it to be revealed. But for this show, it was just like, not another one. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, that was kind of my first impressions.
I will say I kind of understand a little bit in the way where you're saying it seems like there's something missing because, you know, after looking more into not just, you know, the show, but the overall plot of the franchise between the show and the game and everything. Well, for one thing, it's more like a Sword Art Online. It's not really an isekai. It's like a stuck in a video game. It is.
But that's what an isekai is, no? It's an isekai is being transported to another world, whether that world is in a game or not. It's still an isekai because, I mean, me and Kevin even mentioned it as well on Overlord. He's stuck in a game, but it's still an isekai. But that's what I'm saying.
Semantics. A big part of the reason why I think some people, and I'm sure that it's not just you, kind of have that thing that there's something missing is because they don't do a really good job of explaining certain plot lines and events that actually tie into the original game, because that's the whole point. The whole reason it's called Redive is basically they pulled a Final Fantasy 14. When the original game came out just called Princess Connect, it kind of bombed, and they just, after putting all the work in developing the characters and the art and all that kind of stuff, they were like, well, we don't want to just let this property go to waste. So they kind of did a reset on it and literally pulled a Final Fantasy 14 and then renamed it into Princess Connect Redive, and there's certain things that tie back into the plot and characters of the original game that they never bring up unless you go online and you read like different wikis and stories and things like that.
And I think that's a very interesting point as well, because at the same time, this is a show, to me, initially when I was watching it, I felt very lost, at least within the first couple of episodes, because I was like, what the hell is going on? Do I need to, because I knew this game was an anime adaptation, or at least inspired by the game. So I was thinking, do I need to play a bit of the game to understand what's going on? Because initially, and I think you might notice this a lot, and they sort of drop it halfway through the season, but initially in the season, you get a lot of references to the game very early on, right? Win, lose, you know, the victory music that comes up, or the battle music, which I presume is from the game. But you have those titles that come up, you know? When Yuuki got unconscious, it was just saying lose, right? Or when they complete a quest, or when they take on a quest, it will say quest, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? So initially, at least within like the first 6 episodes, you had a bit of that. And then it's sort of forgotten about, you know? So imagine if you're someone that has never played the game before and you see this anime simulcasted and you're like, what is going on? Is this stuck in a game world type situation? Is it not? What is going on? Are they trying to break the fourth wall? Is this a game? Do you see what I'm saying? So there's a lot of confusion that sort of arises from that point, at least early on with like first impressions and stuff like
that. Yeah, you know, thinking back when I very first watched it, even though I did say that, yeah, I was pretty much, you know, I don't want to say gung-ho, but already kind of excited to see what this is going to be. I do remember having that same kind of feeling through, you know, at least the first couple episodes, like, what is going on with this? Why is this main character so dense?
Yes.
And that's an understatement kind of a thing. So, yeah, I totally understand what you're saying there. I guess we'll just kind of use that to kind of segue into the main character talk. So what did you originally, you know, think about Yuuki yourself?
To be honest with you, when it comes to characters, it is a bit odd, because Yuuki initially, when I looked at his character design, it reminded me of Kazuma from Konosuba. It's pretty similar. He's got the cape. It just feels as though he is, I would say, a brain dead version of Kazuma, right? Because he doesn't know initially even how to talk, right? I mean, he knew some phrases, some words, but he didn't know the word for friends. He didn't know, there's so much that he didn't understand. He didn't understand the concept of money, but yet towards the end of the show, or even certain points in the show's plot, he knows a lot. You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of unexpected how much he knows and how much he doesn't at the same time, if that makes sense. He does have some funny moments, I will say that. Like, his denseness, his density, if that makes sense, really shines in certain scenes. Like, there was this one scene where they got turned into pudding and they were trying to find him. They're like, what's happening to Yuuki? Where's Yuuki? After they got turned back into humans. And then you look at the ghost and there's like a little bit of pudding on the ghost, and just in the stars it's just Yuuki with his thumbs up saying bye-bye. And that floored me, which is funny because it's like there isn't that many funny moments in the show for me, but when I saw that with Yuuki, I could not stop laughing. So there's certain things that I do like about him, but at the same time, I think he's too dumbed down for the show. And there's a lot of things and there's a lot of questions that I have about the character. Like, why did he lose his memory? It's not mentioned how he lost his memory. And then there's stuff that's sort of pieced throughout the show, like, hey, he has sisters. He used to have a different party. Like, what is going on, right? We don't actually get much character development from him, and sometimes his denseness and the fact that, you know, it was funny at first when he was getting eaten by all of these monsters and animals, but then it sort of became this sort of comic relief trope, which it works in a show like Konosuba because you're not supposed to take Konosuba seriously, but I don't know, in this show it doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I will say that, you know, especially now after playing the game, it kind of makes some of the choices they made with Yuuki in the anime a bit more head scratching, I guess would be a way to put it, because in the game he's not as dense and dumb. He does have the memory loss. That's kind of, you know, the same kind of plot there, but he's still a very capable person in the game, and even then, you know, it doesn't even really come up that much except to like main story beats and things like that in the game. So I think it was one of those decisions they decided to go with just to amp up the comedy part with him, I guess, because in the game he's not really comedic at all. He's basically there to, you know, just help out the girls and, you know, power them up, as you see, you know, in the anime. Like, he has that ability where he can, you know, basically juice them up to have, you know, stronger abilities and powers. So that was like super weird to me, but, you know, I did enjoy some of the comedy that came along with it, but not all of it. Now, to me, I obviously more just enjoy the girls, and then, you know, and I don't mean that from just that, you know, oh, here's this misogynistic viewpoint that I'm just here for the cute girls. No, I just enjoyed their friendship, their comedies, you know, their interactions, their growth and things like that a whole lot more, especially after they, you know, kind of came together, you know, to form their guild. You know, once they actually got doing the guild events, that's when things kind of seemed to pick up for me. But as far as Yuuki goes, yeah, I really don't like him very much in this first season, to be honest.
It's very interesting that you mentioned regarding the female characters. Majority of the characters in this show are female characters, and I'd imagine it's because they're probably trying to show off a lot of the characters that you could possibly get in the game, if I'm not mistaken. Then.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's why it's called, you know, Princess Connect, like, because all the characters that you can collect and play with in the game, they are all girls, and like, you know, technically whatever their main like special, you know, super ability is, however you want to call it, it's called a princess power.
So I can't necessarily fault you when you're saying your favorite characters are female characters, because really Yuuki is the only male characters apart from those thieves at the beginning, the guy with the afro and the skinny guy. There isn't that many male characters in the show. I mean, at least in major roles such as Yuuki.
Yeah.
It is very interesting though, because the female characters, I could see where this characters come from, and finding out that this is basically an adaptation of a gacha game is where I could see where the characters emerge, right? And this is a bit weird for me to say this, but the characters are tropes. Like, they are pure tropes, and in gacha games you kind of see that more often because, well, that's the whole point. It's about collecting characters, collecting different types of characters, and I could tell you from now, like, each character has their different trope. I can't even remember all the characters, but, you know, you have someone like, I can't even pronounce her name, the Nekomimi.
The main crew, if you want to go over the Gourmet Guild, which is what the anime focuses on, obviously we already talked about Yuuki, and then after him you've got Kokkoro, who's, you know, the little elf girl. Then you've got, you know, Pecorine, and then you've got Karyl, or Karyl, however you want to say her name, which is the main cat girl. And then you've got all the dozens and dozens of other girls that, you know, make appearances here and there.
And I think that's quite interesting because, you know, you've got a character like Karyl, right, who's basically a very tsundere character. And as soon as I saw her, I was like, no, I can't be dealing with this. Like, it's incredibly annoying for me. Look, I used to say this a lot on Kunai, that I'm a big fan of tsundere characters. But at the same time,
don't you dare badmouth her.
I am going to. And look, she's an interesting character, but at the same time, I do find that this anime heavily focuses on tropes, and after a while, it can be a bit exhausting, right? It's the same with Pecorine, right? Okay, I get it. She likes to eat, but we only get clarification of her eating, I think, I can't remember, until like episode 9, the beach episode, which is more than 3/4 way into the season, right, where she's basically saying, oh, I have to eat because of my armor, you know, it gives me all of these buffs, and to maintain that,
you're talking about Pecorine.
Yeah, Pecorine, yeah. So like, that's what I'm saying. There's a lot of things that aren't necessarily described to us. Like, I wouldn't have even batted an eye. I wouldn't have even wanted a explanation as to why she eats a lot, because, well, that's a trope in a lot of anime and in a lot of anime games, where you have a character that just like eats a shit ton and doesn't get overweight or anything like that, which makes sense.
It's funny that you say that too, you know, because I can't help but talk about the game when correlating to the anime now that I've been playing the game for a while. It's funny that you mentioned that coming up so deep, because that part of her character story doesn't even come until you're well deep into the game either. So I'm wondering if they were kind of using that to kind of match, where the story was in the game itself.
It's more than possible, but like I said, I mean, if you're someone who's never played the game before, you might have a lot of questions that may not necessarily be answered in the show, and I think that is a major flaw. But speaking of the other characters, I kind of found the side characters to be more interesting, right? Like not the guild at all. Like Arima, the little alpaca girl, I thought that was super interesting. And then you had,
she's great.
I can't remember the other one's name, but the lizard girl, the one that's yandere, the one that Yuuki is like shit scared of. That's what I'm saying about the tropes.
Eriko.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like we got an interesting episode out of it. Don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it's like, okay, we basically got a yandere-esque character, right? And you got your kudere characters, you got your dandere characters. You've got basically every anime girl trope in anime. You have it here. And I think if you like that, that's great, but constantly getting bombarded with that kind of stuff makes it feel as though exhausting. That's the only way I could say it. Like, the characters are genuinely exhausting, and I don't really care about them, Will. You know what I mean? Like, I've never seen an anime in which I genuinely don't give a shit about whether these characters succeed or not. I think the only interesting plot point surrounding the characters is with Karyl and her being a double agent. That is interesting. I wanted to see more of that throughout the show, but then it sort of, I don't know if this is something that kind of appears in the game or even in the second season, but it sort of feels as though she feels like, yes, I'm gonna go back to the good guys. I wasn't a fan of them. And that in itself is also a trope, right? Where you have a double agent that's working for the bad guys, then turning over to the good guys side, if that makes sense.
No, it's so interesting to like hear your point of view from that, because I mean I totally understand it. I'm not gonna disagree with you in those regards and say that you're wrong, because I'm thinking back to when I was first watching it to when I rewatched it this time to playing the game, and it's I hate bringing up season 2, but season 2 becomes much more structured, and it actually starts to follow a bit more of the story, whereas this first season, to me, it seems like, for lack of better words, an adventure of the week. Like each week was some kind of just adventure that wasn't really congruent to the entire overall story of the plot, and then you started getting little touches of it, especially with the Karyl aspect of it, because she is actually one of the main parts of the story and one of the main focuses of it, but you don't get a whole lot of that in season 1, and they never even touch on it in season 1 either, that technically, like, in this little group, from what we know of the story, herself and Yuuki are actually like the two strongest people there are. Like, a lot of people think it's Pecorine because she's like your main fighter, quote unquote tank type trope of character, but Karyl and Yuuki actually have the strongest powers in this universe at the moment, but they never actually explain that. You only even know that, like I said, if you go on and you read the wikis and you play the game.
I don't know if you want to say anything more about characters, but that's a very interesting point, and I think would kind of tie into the story segment of the show.
I do at least want to talk a little bit about Kokkoro, because she's obviously Yuki's kind of right hand gal. Like, she's the one that's actually sent by Ameth to basically be his guide and help him and all that type of stuff. So she's very, very much important as well, and she's actually very powerful in her own right.
Important in what sense? Because to me she seems like she's basically his carer or his mum and his guardian, effectively.
That's exactly it. She's his guardian, his caretaker, and one to kind of help, I don't want to say guide him, but basically just watch over him and everything, because Ameth still knows pretty much everything from the past, but she can't do anything herself. So this is why she's got Kokkoro there to kind of like be her hand on Yuuki until he can regain his memories and his own potential and all that kind of stuff. So that's why she's important in those regards. But she's also, like, you keep saying how like each of these characters, that trope, she's your cute, soft-spoken. What's the word? It's not dandere.
No,
the one where it's like
kudere, I think, is the one.
Kudere. Yeah. That's it. That's probably it. But she's that trope in those regards. So it's one of those things where it's like the four of them, between Yuuki, Pecorine, and Kokkoro, and Karyl, that they're more than just the main characters, though. They're the unit that works together, but they're more or less, more than anything, the vessel for you as the viewer, your eyes into the world and all these other characters. And the whole point of, the anime obviously is to entice people to play the games by the figures, so every episode, each week, even though, like I said earlier, there is going to be that kind of overarching plot and story, you don't get a lot of that until later because they're just going through and introducing characters and things like that.
See, that's the thing I really wanted to say about Kokkoro, is that it's interesting because her name literally means heart, right? So she's supposed to be this sort of loving, caring character, one that is there to basically take care of Yuuki. But I find it a bit shit because that's basically her only existence, right? And what's going to happen when Amith returns, right? Is Kokkoro just going to be useless? Because her main purpose is to take care of Yuuki. What happens when Yuuki regains his memories? There's so many things that, I don't know, that sort of hinges around Yuuki that make you think, well, are these characters necessary if Yuuki had his memories, right? And that kind of, in a way, helps to break down the show a little bit for me.
Well, it's one of those things, though, too, that Yuki's strength is the fact that he's able to, like I said earlier, not only support but boost the powers of the girls that are in this world and everything. So he does need a unit regardless of who it is, and like how you touched on earlier, how he actually had an original guild, an original party before this group, and losing his memories and all that type of stuff. So regardless of anything that happens, he can't be a one-man show. He literally has to have not an army, but he has to have a force around him that he can then use his powers to boost them to accomplish whatever needs to be done. Think of it kind of like if you've seen any of the Rising of the Shield Hero, where the Shield Hero himself can't really fight, but he can use his powers and abilities, and he has people to fight for him that he can share his strength with.
Okay.
Same kind of premise.
What do you think about the structure of the show? Because to me, the story didn't make much sense, right? Because it does have an overarching story. We do know that. And at first, it kind of felt as though, oh, do these episodes really matter? Like, in which order you watch them? And in fact, they do, because at the beginning of every episode, they kind of reference what happened the previous day, if that makes sense. And I'm like, shit, I kind of wish it didn't do that. You know what I mean? Because it kind of grounds that previous episode in reality, and it means you can't enjoy the show out of context. Do you know what I mean? It's one that you actually have to sit down and watch and actually enjoy it. And because of certain plot points and because of certain issues with the story, having it very linear like that helps to sort of draw out those flaws. One being this, right? I did mention the episode in which Yuuki is in the sky and he's like, bye-bye. The episode with the pudding, right? The very next episode, we get no reference to what happened to the previous episode. I'm like, how is Yuuki there? Like, what? Like, I swear he just got eaten. So how is he there? But then in the previous episode, the episode after the beach episode, right, they're eating the squid sandwiches, which is a reference to the previous episode. So it makes me think having the references to the previous episodes doesn't really help the show out, and it just draws the flaws out a little bit, and that kind of upsets me. I don't know what you think about that.
I'm not going to say it upsets me, but I mean, I've noticed some of the pacing issues too, and it's one of those things that now that I've gotten deep into playing the game too, I can notice where the anime itself, even though, like you said, it's referencing each previous week's episode, it's still not in order, because anime is actually mixing in story elements from not just the main story campaign of the game, but also like character side stories and event side stories and things like that really, I think, are messing up the flow of the story, I guess you say. So think of it this way. Think of like, a lot of long-running shonen anime that have filler episodes. It's almost like that. It's not filler because it is still actual like canon story from the source material, but they're interjecting it into a way that's breaking up how the story actually should be going. And that's why I also think that it's not until they get deep into first season that it really starts to swing into that main story element, and then that continues on into season 2.
If you're watching this without seeing the game or having any exposure to the game like me, those episodes feel like filler, right? And this is one of the reasons why we don't really like doing game adaptations on Kunai, because of this reason, right? Because some games will do it, some game animes will do it in a certain way, like for example Persona 4, the animation, the original. They had to cover a lot of different social links, a lot of different, you know, interactions and side missions with characters, but they've done it in a very unique way. They basically dedicated one whole episode out of, I think, 24 episodes to all of the side missions, and they managed to make sure that every episode had action, actually had something that was relating to the main story. And I do understand that, yes, because of the source material, you're kind of limited because of how the game story works and stuff like that. But it was kind of a little bit of a cop-out because we're going 6 episodes in. I was thinking, yes, we're going to get action, because we did get a serious amount of action within the first episode. And then by episode 6, I was like, okay, maybe we're getting a little bit more. And then bam, what was it? It was episode 8 or something that it just goes on to this episode with the kids and teaching them how to be a part of a guild, right? Which is
yeah, the little lyrical thing, which is actually, and that's what we say, that's one of those parts I was talking about, is an actual like event in the game.
Yeah. And that's
it's not part of the main story. It's an event story in the game.
And that's the thing. There's so many things that I've noticed. Obviously, I'm noticing this because I have played games like this in the past, right? These gacha games where there are special events and timed events and all of that kind of stuff. I've noticed that throughout, and I'm questioning myself. I'm like, is this related to the actual story, or is this an event mission, or is this a side mission, or is this a character bonding event? You know what I mean? And as an anime fan, it's not fun to sort of question yourself whether or not is this actually part of the story. Can I skip this? And I will say this, the show does it in a very interesting way, is that obviously with the Little Lyrical Guild.
Yeah, Little Lyrical is the name of the guild, yeah. Or the little girls.
With the Little Lyrical, right, you're introduced to them early on. And the anime does that. They will introduce a character really early on and then introduce them again in more detail further along the line. They think they did the same with Rima. They did the same with Suzume. They did a lot of things, even with that lizard girl. I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, but
Eriko,
exactly. So even with Eriko, you're getting these sort of callbacks. I think with Eriko, it was a reverse way. So you kind of got a lot of detail in her main episode in the hospital/prison. And then you got that sort of reference to her, I think in episode 11 or episode 12 with the hot dog. You know, you kind of get that, but with most of the characters, you get a little glimpse of them initially. They say hello and then they reappear, which I think was quite nice. It's not something that we kind of see a lot in anime in general. A lot of callbacks to other characters and actual character development that way. It's a very unique way of doing it, and I will say it is successful in the concept of the show. One thing I will say is that, at least with the way that the show is structured, the sheer amount of characters sort of hurts the way the show is, right? Because the more you introduce...
It's really difficult with gacha games in general. This is why, like, you know, a lot of these type games ended up getting turned into anime. There's so many times where a character will be introduced and then they're forgotten about. And that's one thing that frustrates the crap out of me with stories like this.
Yeah, but, you know, to be honest with you, at least in this show, they don't necessarily get forgotten about. You do get to see them come back. I don't know how it is in the second season, but we're not talking about that. But the fact that you have too many characters, it means character development isn't such a priority. It also means that because you have to focus on so many different characters and so many different side stories, a lot of actual action scenes get cut out very quickly. You know what I mean? Like, there was that episode where they had to capture... Well, they had to save the bridge from that monster. That went down really quickly.
Yeah, and that is actually part of the story in the game too. That is taken straight from the game.
But that's what I'm saying. Well, there was no way for me to differentiate. Was that part of the game? Was that not? But that's not the point. The point is this anime excels in its combat scenes. Like, I really love the scenes where you actually are fighting. I love those story beats where we do get to see what's going on in the background. What is this sort of drama that's going on with the royal family? What's going on with the fighting? And then you get like 5 minutes of fighting, or, you know, you see this big bad monster and then 5 minutes later, oh, he's defeated. It's like, that's the stuff I think a lot of people would like to see. And if you compare it to a lot of shows that may be similar, I'm not going to compare it to Overlord, but I think the closest competitor to this show would be something like Konosuba, right? In which you do get to see your wide variety of characters, but at the same time, your main guild in Konosuba, and even in this show, your main guild is given that character development. You understand the characters a lot more. And in this show, because there's too many characters and you're giving time to all of these different characters, I don't really see the guild as more than tropes. And I don't want to get back onto this point regarding tropes, but that's just the way I see it. And I think it's down to how many episodes there are. If this was a 24 episode season and they focused a lot more on what was going on in the background, then potentially I could forgive the amount of side episodes and side missions and all that kind of stuff. Like, that's just the way I see it.
Yeah, I wonder if it's one of those things where it was like, not only were they just trying to do too much with only a 13 episode show, but also trying to like shoehorn things into the anime to try to entice people to play the game, and then they're just, you know, obviously not really succeeding at it unless you're someone like me. Like, I actually love most of the characters in this show, but, you know, I'm one of those, you know, quote unquote waifu collecting guys. I mean, I, you know, like those type of games and stories anyway. So it's like, it's kind of like how you were saying where you would see a character introduced, but then they would get some kind of actual story or development later. Again, I wonder if that's one of those things that are taken from the game, because there's parts in the game where you're just like in the town, and then there's characters mentioned in the background or introduced, and they're like, hi, nice meeting you, and then you don't get any more story with them until later chapters in the game. So I'm wondering if that's what they're, like I said, I think it's one of those things where they're trying to make the anime like the game, and that's why, like you said, until like after, like with episode 6, like episode 6 is one of the episodes that I, you know, kind of wrote down some things about too. Like, you're like, yeah, it's finally gonna go somewhere, but then it takes that side turn, like where they go to help harvest the spice in the next episode, and then the episode after that's the little lyrical episode. So it isn't really until after the pudding episode that it shifts back into actually having more of a story, but then at that point it's only those last 3 episodes of the first season. You know what I mean? So I think it's one of those things where, again, the only, and I'm not trying to make excuses for them, but, you know, as being their first really self-produced, you know, anime, I think they were just trying to do, they weren't trying to do too much with too little. They were trying to pack too much into too little time.
I think also, I will kind of give it a pass as well, because this was something that was produced during COVID. It's not easy. You could see that there was a lot of studios that were being crushed around this time, and obviously because of a lack of collaboration, people couldn't go in and work, and all sorts of people had to work from home. There was all of that, and I completely understand that. But I will say this is something that plagues a lot of anime adaptations of games a lot, right? The fact that we can't include too much because we don't want people to be spoiled for the game, or we can't give the characters too much character development because they got to play the game to find out. It's something that we've seen in Persona 4, the animation, on Kunai, and something that we did discuss, as well as when we did our episode for Danganronpa. That was something as well. There was something that because actually it was Kevin that brought it up, but it was something that me and Joe were trying to defend and saying, well, if you play the game, you get that character development. But we kind of have to think about it away from the game for a moment, because once again, the whole point of this anime is to get people to play the game. But it feels as though, like, I am probably going to go and play the game because of it, but only because the anime did such a poor job of character development and story structure, if that makes sense. So I'm not going to play the game because I want to play the game. I'm going to play the game because I feel like I have to actually truly understand the characters in the anime. And I think that it just shows that the anime is poorly structured and that they don't really consider these things. And it may be the case, right? Because I remember when this anime was coming out, I didn't pay much attention to it. But if you were not signed, like if you had a Crunchyroll account and you weren't signed in for any reason in the app, you'd get ads for this game constantly, because obviously Crunchyroll helped to license it. And I think even the game, if I'm not mistaken, is published by Crunchyroll Games in the West. So it just feels to me as though this anime is basically designed to be one big advertisement for the game, and it's not really doing a good job as being a standalone show, if that makes sense. And that's one of my biggest issues with it.
I totally get what you're saying. Again, like I said, it still didn't personally affect too much of my enjoyment, but it's one of those things where I had so many questions that's why I decided to finally try the game. And then after I started getting into the game, of course, is when season 2 came out. Spoiler, there is a season 2. I can't disagree with anything that you're saying there. So what about you say that you don't feel like you really cared about any of the characters, but did you have any favorite or least favorite characters?
I'll be honest with you, my favorite character in the whole show is Rima, the alpaca. But that's because she's got the comic relief. She's quite funny, but also she kind of stands her ground as well. Like, I actually feel that she's a very firm character. You also see that she has a level of I don't know, there's like, she can get hurt, emotionally. She can get offended. She actually has the most, in my opinion, she has, like, for her being a side character, she actually has quite a lot of character development. And also the fact that she's very intriguing because she is an alpaca, but she can turn into a humanoid character by eating this apple, right? So I'm like, well, what happens? It makes me want to know about this metamorphosis apple. What happens if a Nekomimi character, right, eats the apple? Do they turn into a cat? Like, that's the thing. And why does she need this apple when there's so many other people in this show that are humanoid / animal characters, if that makes sense? So why does she, like, she's like very unique in the sense she's the only character that is an animal that can talk, as opposed to a humanoid crossbreed with an animal, if that makes sense. So I found that quite interesting. Like, she's obviously part of the Elizabeth Park team, but I wanted to know more about the Elizabeth Park. I wanted to know more, like, why are they like that? Are they just a team that is basically animal characters, if that makes sense? Like, you got the Squirrel Girl, which I thought was quite interesting as well, because I'm a big fan of Squirrel Girl, the Marvel comics. So I was like, hell yeah, big fan of Squirrel Girl. Besides her, I wasn't too interested in, like, the rest of the characters, but mainly it's because her character design was interesting and she had, like, the metamorphosis apple. I think that there were some characters that just didn't make any sense and we didn't get much explanation behind them, like Hatsune. She doesn't use magic, she has superpowers, but then it's like, well, what the hell? How does that make sense in this world, in this odd medieval world, that she's the only character that has superpowers, but the rest of them use magic, right? There's so many things that I have to question. Like, even there was this one bit when they were having a picnic, Karyl actually brings out a thermos, and I'm like, what? Like, it's medieval. How do you have a fucking thermos? Like, it didn't make much sense to me. But that's besides the point. I mean, in terms of my, like, I would say my favorite character, it's got to be Rima, 100%. What about you?
Rima is definitely a very unique character, both in the anime and the game. She's a lot of fun. I'm very easy. I'm very simple when it comes to this. If anyone knows me, they know my typical types and everything. So my favorite is actually Karyl. After playing the game, I have a couple other favorites, but it's one of those things where it's like they're not in the anime much, so it wasn't until I got into the game that I started liking other characters. So as far as the anime goes, Karyl is my number one favorite character. I think she's the most intriguing because of this whole kind of like double agent thing, and it's one of those things where I really hate tying things into second season, but you can't really find out a lot of why she's doing what she's doing until second season. But I also do like, at least in first season, where they show aspects of her thinking, maybe I can be friends with these people, maybe I can care about other people. Things of that nature, plus just knowing just how powerful she really is, but at the same time she's not dumb, but she lets her emotions control her way too much. And I personally think she's one of the more deeper characters in the series.
I will agree with you in that point. She is one of the more deeper characters, and I think the reason that she is because she has this major plot point revolving around her and her being a double agent. I think if she wasn't the double agent, then I don't think we would have seen much from her as a character, in my personal opinion.
And I will say that Pecorine is actually a pretty deep character too, but again, you can't really get into her until you get into season 2.
And that's the thing. I mean, with Pecorine, it's very interesting because we obviously know that she's it's clearly obvious from the very get-go that she's a princess, right? Every one of her moves has princess in the name. She wears a fucking crown. And I'm like, how does everyone else not know? But then, guess what? No one remembers that she's a princess, and you only find that out until the very end. And part of me thought like the character that we saw that was the princess in the show, or the person that Karyl works for, when we see her in the show, initially I thought she was maybe like the sort of evil stepmother type situation, right? That sort of usurped the throne. That's what I assumed. I didn't necessarily think that, actually she's managed to make the royal family think that she's actually their daughter, even though all of the pictures in the house, in the palace, it's silly. I 100% get it. I will give you some little tidbits on that when we are off the air. But like I said, I thought that was a bit odd because it was just like, so no one remembered her completely. So then it's another character that has, effectively, it's like reverse amnesia. Like she can remember everything, but no one else remembers. And I'm like, okay, that's another trope in anime. It's bad enough that we have that with Yuuki, but then part of me thinks that maybe Yuki's amnesia has something to do with...
It all kind of ties back into the whole reset of the world. But it's one of those things that they don't do a good job conveying that in the anime. Did you have any least favorite characters?
I think I've said enough about the characters. Like, to be honest with you, genuinely... There isn't a character that I would say I really, really love. So in essence, they're all my least favorite characters.
So you said earlier that you really did enjoy some of the fight scenes and stuff like that. What did you actually think about the actual animation overall?
The animation was quite decent, actually. I mean, you kind of got that differentiation between your funnier scenes and then your fighting scenes. Like, not many anime could do that well, you know what I mean? Sometimes it's just all shown in battle scenes, and then sometimes it's like too funny. I think it kind of reminds me of Konosuba in that sense. Like, when it wants to be funny, when the animation wants to be a bit chill or a bit goofy, it can be, and then when it wants to just go out there and just fucking slay, it can. So yeah, the animation seemed good. There was some things that I didn't necessarily like about it, but overall I was really, really impressed. What I did want to see though was more of those fight scenes because they were fucking interesting. I will say this though, with Pecorine, right, she only uses one move. So you kind of see that animation for that one move with the massive crown that comes out all the time. and it gets a bit repetitive. But other than that, I think the animation was solid. One thing I will say though, there is a lot of 3D animation in this game. In this anime. There's a lot of 3D animation in this anime, and I've said it before, good 3D animation in anime is animation that you wouldn't necessarily notice, right? And initially, you don't notice it. Like with the ring in the hospital, that's in 3D, but you don't necessarily notice it because it's like smaller pieces, smaller little bits wiggling about. Or the clock, I think, was really well animated. That clock that tick-tocks with Ameth and stuff, that's really well animated. And then it gets to the shadow at the end of the show, because initially the shadows weren't drawn in 3D, and then as they get bigger, they were drawn in 3D. And then to the point where you get the colossal shadow that comes in to wreck the city, and it just looked like dog shit. Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, it looked like someone was making a mod for Persona, because basically, like, those are basically the shadows from Persona 3 that you fight in the game, right? So it's like someone was trying to make a HD mod for Persona 3 and it flopped. Like, that's what it looked like to me. It didn't look interesting. It just took me out of it. It kind of reminded me of, you know, the skeleton dragon in Overlord?
Yes.
It reminded me of that.
Unfortunately.
And I was like, okay, this isn't that good. And it makes me think, like, how come they didn't just 2D animate this? It would have looked so much better. But then I think about it, well, this was done during COVID. The 3D animation would have taken a lot less time. There would have been some time constraints and that kind of stuff. So I understand where they're coming from.
This is one of those things where it seems like you and I kind of seem to be eye to eye on it. It's both great and frustrating at times. There's so many times in the show where the animation it's better than what the show needed. It's like there's certain times in the show where it's like this show has no right to look this good, and in those other times where you get total moments of pure derpiness, and I don't even mean derpiness for the context of the comedy like it does from time to time, but like you said, with some of those CG parts and things like that, it's very very up and down. It's a roller coaster ride from good to bad, to great to good to bad. It's very middling at times, but like I said, those some of the highs for the animation quality are very, very high. It's just that unfortunately some of those bad spikes are very sharp and very sudden.
Here's a question for you. Do you think if Game Studio, animation studio, do you think that if they decided to go for a sort of mid-tier or sort of mediocre animation but just kept it consistent, do you think that would have been better than having the really good animation at points and then just the really shitty animation at others?
No, because like I said, to me, in my personal opinion, that the highs were too good to take them out. Like if you said, would you take out the highs if you could get more consistencies through it? Actually, no, not in this case, not in this show, because like I said, some of those highs were really, really high to me personally. And it's funny because I don't want to say I didn't get into arguments with people, but I had some, let's just say, heated debates while the show was going on, where people are like, oh my god, this is so amazing, did you watch this in this episode, did you see this in this episode? I said, yeah, that looked great, but what about this bad shot? And like I even took like some screenshots and put it on there, and they're like, what are you going on about? Looks fine to me. I'm like, do you not see this?
Do you think people would sort of look past it? Because I mean, obviously we're talking about it in terms of a very analytical sense, right? Because we're reviewing the show, but do you think a general member of the audience would be looking past the more shittier shots as they're watching?
More than likely, unless they're, well, I don't know, because to me personally, some of the shit shots were just as stand out as the amazing shots were. So it's kind of hard for me to say. I think if someone is just, loading up their Crunchyroll subscription and they're just popping it on to watch and everything, I think they'll probably give it a pass. But I also think that people like that won't notice those highs as well either. Now I will say one thing that I think also accentuated those highs were some of the sound effects. I thought like some of the like magical effect sounds are going off, the explosions, the high impact sounds. I thought those were phenomenal in the few fight scenes that we did get.
To be honest with you, I mean, in terms of the sound effects, I wasn't too impressed. Like, I was just immersed in the fight scenes, and maybe that might be a good thing, the fact that it just melded well together. But then there was some that sort of took me out of it a little bit. Ones that were kind of more references to the or I would say are references to the game, because I haven't played the game, but it kind of felt like in-game effects, if that makes sense. And I understand they probably went for a comedic route with those points, but it sort of took me out of it. Although, that being said, the music, I'm not sure. The battle music that we get that reoccurs, is that actually battle music that we get in the game?
Yeah, so that's the other thing. Like, most of the sound effects, most of the music is taken straight from the game.
Okay, because those were really excellent. And I like the fact that when you start hearing the music, you know that there's a fight going on. It kind of gets you hyped. It's like, in the sense, you know, if you're playing Final Fantasy game and then you hear the music, the battle theme starting to play, right? You're like, hell yeah, I'm getting into... Or, you know, when you go inside a boss battle, the music changes, that kind of stuff. And I really do enjoy that. It kind of just lets the listeners know that... no, not the listeners. It lets the audience know that there is an upcoming fight, and you really get hyped for it. Although, yeah, the fight doesn't last that long, but it does get you hyped for it, and I do really enjoy the music in that sense. The soundtrack overall was really impressive. Opening and endings, though, I don't know if you had an opinion on it. For me, they weren't that good. Like, I skipped through them.
I love the opening, and I will say I like the ending too, but I love the opening to this. I'm one of those people, though, that anytime I watch anime, I never skip the opening and ending. I watch them every time, even if it's ones I don't really like. If I'm still watching the show, I still watch them both.
Like, for me, it just felt as though it didn't match the show or the tone of the show, because it was like this weird sort of jazz music initially, and then it goes into this woman singing, and it felt very 90s anime, and I was like, what the hell is going on here? Like, the OP didn't decide what genre of music it was. I didn't like it.
Again, taken straight from the game.
Well,
even
yeah.
The OP.
I'm not a fan of it.
I like it, but you know, that's me and everything. Now I do want to just bring up a couple things here about the voice actors too. So probably the biggest voice actor, you know, that's going to be in the show is going to be actually the voice actress for Pecorine is I always butcher her last name, but Mao Ichimichi, or otherwise known as Mao, or just Mao, if you know who that is.
No, what kind of stuff has she worked on?
She's been in a lot. So, well, she's in Tensura. She's Shion in Tensura.
Oh, okay.
If you've seen that. Yeah. She's Sakura from Classroom of the Elite. She is one of the, you know, the three girls that are kind of like Takagi-san's friends in Teasing Master Takagi-san. She's the one with the glasses, Yukari. Of course, you know, she's, oh god, I'm trying to think. There's something that she was really well known for here not too long ago, and I can't brain farting here at the moment. I know she was in Fire Force. I can't remember who she is in Fire Force though. But long story short, she's been in a ton of works. Like, she has a huge fan following. I'm not exactly sure what role it is that really made her blow up, but yeah, she's been around for, you know, for quite a while. So she's like, I'm sitting here trying to look at her Mao page, and it's like her voice acting roles just scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. So yeah, she's been in a lot. And then Karyl, her voice actress hasn't done a whole lot, but it's Rika Tachibana. But a lot of people do still know her name. Most recently, other than doing Princess Connect, she was in Assault Lily Bouquet, which is another anime based on the game. It's a pretty good anime, though, in my personal opinion. And then if you look at Kokkoro's voice actress, Miku Ito, well, she voices Miku from Quintessential Quintuplets.
It's not a show that I've seen, so I really wouldn't know.
Oh, you haven't seen?
I
Okay,
haven't seen
so
it. No, I haven't.
I gotcha. I know you've seen Ueno-san, because we talked about that. Yeah, so she's Yomogi Tanaka in that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else she's been in that you might know. I don't think so though. But yeah, she hasn't been in a whole lot, but she's been in some good stuff. So there's good voice talent here. There's good animation talent. There's obviously good musical talent, in my personal opinion. But that's one of the things that Cygames is also known for, is their musical staff. I mean, a lot of people that work for Cygames in their art department and in their music department have pedigrees not just from anime but also other gaming franchises like Final Fantasy and Nier and things like that as well. Now we've pretty much gone through everything as we've talked through each little tidbit. Did you have any other particular gripes or grumbles that you wanted to bring up?
No, to be honest with you, I think that's pretty much it in terms of my gripes and grumbles.
Yeah, I think I've pretty much touched on everything myself, though even through all the gripes and grumbles, I still like the show, and I knew from even watching this, just because I love the characters of like Karyl and Pecorine, that I wanted to see a second season. What are your thoughts on that? Would you want to see a second season?
That's a difficult one, because part of me doesn't want to see a second season, and the reason being is because I was a bit disappointed with this first season, and it makes me think that it's going to be more of the same. Do you know what I mean? Especially if you're watching the anime for the first time, don't know any sort of context behind it. It makes me think as though the second season is going to be more of the same, and I was physically exhausted watching this show, so I don't want to see a second season for that reason. But then there's part of me that wants to see a second season so that I know more about the story, because the story just got interesting in the last 3 episodes of the show, and I'm hoping that that story continues on for second season. Now, the second season does exist, but yeah, am I gonna go and watch it straight away? I'll probably give myself some time, and maybe like a couple of months, and then go into second season and see how that fares out, just so I know the remainder of the story. It's a weird one.
You're such a butthead.
Why?
Because I was going to ask you, it's like, well, now that you know there's a second season, do you think you want to watch it? But you've already answered
I've
it.
answered
so now
it.
I can't ask you the question. You're such a butthead.
I'm sorry for being a butthead. But yeah, in that sort of thing, like, what were your overall thoughts of the show? Like, would you recommend it to someone? Who would you recommend it to?
It's hard for me to say that I would recommend this to someone, just because, like, I personally don't know a lot of other anime fans like me that totally go for this kind of show. So again, I think I've said this before on other episodes that we've done. It'd be one of those things I would only recommend it to a very specific audience. Now, I will say, that if I do know someone that likes a show like Konosuba, or like Combatants Will Be Dispatched, or the Reluctant Hero one, things like that, then I'd be like, well, maybe you might like this show. But like I said, it's a very narrow audience that I would recommend this series to.
I agree with you on that point, but I disagree with you in terms of the whole, if you like Konosuba, don't watch this show. You'll be disappointed, because I know that if you've seen Konosuba, Crunchyroll might suggest this show to you. Don't watch this show if you're a big fan of Konosuba, because you're gonna really dread this show. You're gonna hate it.
No,
that's my personal opinion, because
that's your opinion. I say no. If you like Konosuba, watch the show.
I don't think so, and I think it's because Konosuba is better in the sense because it has better comedy, it has better animation, better fight scenes. Overall, it's a well-structured show. That's why I'm saying if you're a big fan of Konosuba and like the shows for that merit, then this show will disappoint you because it's not well-structured. The characters aren't well developed either. It's got great animation in some points, but then lackluster in the other. So that's why I'm saying it would be a disappoint to watch it.
Hey man, just because you like Kellogg's Frosted Flakes doesn't mean you can't eat the Great Value brand.
Yeah, this is Walmart Great Value Konosuba. That's basically what this show is, which I don't mean that as a insult. Like, it's one of those shows that if I had nothing else to watch, I would watch it, right? But there's so many good anime out there Like, I can't find myself to actually want to watch this show because of the things that we've mentioned, right? And if you're a fan of the game, definitely go and watch it because you're really going to enjoy it. If you're a fan of, you know, that sort of waifu gacha hunter game, then you'd enjoy that 100%. If you want to support Psy Games, then yeah, definitely watch this anime because, well, you end up supporting them and that's fine, right? But who would I recommend this to? I agree with you. Well, I can't really find that many people to suggest this show to. Like, definitely this wouldn't make much sense to anime newcomers. Even anime veterans may not enjoy this show for what it is because of, you know, the gripes that we did mention previously. But yeah, that being said, I don't know if you have any other points on that, Will, or not.
No, the last point that I'm going to say is this. Regardless of everything that either I said or you said, and even me saying that, you know, I would only recommend this show to a very limited audience, as I've said repeatedly through this episode, I still really enjoyed the show, and I do recommend people at least try to give it a shot. You know, anyone listening to this episode, even if you're like, this doesn't sound for me, just at least watch the first 1 or 2 episodes. Give it a try. And then from there, if you're like, nope, this isn't for me, I can't blame you for it, but I personally love it, even through all of its warts.
I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't say even the first 2 episodes. I'd just say maybe watch the first 6 episodes. It will give you...
No, Bish. No.
No, I'm
saying the last word. I'm saying the last word.
I'm being honest. Because
just try the show. No,
the show doesn't get interesting until like
I'm cutting
episode
you off.
6.
Nope, stop. I'm cutting you off right now.
But
try the show.
Speaking
period.
of being cut off, Will, thank you for coming on this episode of the podcast.
Yeah, man, it was fun.
And also thank you guys for listening. Just as a reminder, be sure to give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, on Spotify, wherever you listen to this podcast. Just give us a 5-star rating. It really does help the show. In addition to that, if you do want to support the show even further, big thanks to our sponsors, Crunchyroll, where you can actually watch this show if you go to crunchyroll.com/kunai, or Sugoimart if you go to getlifepodcast.com/sugoi and use the code GALP. You get 15% off on all of the website. Finally, Will, do you know what the next episode of Kunai is? I don't think you do. But
I don't have a clue. You haven't told me.
I haven't even told Will. So the next episode of Kunai is one that I'm really excited to do, and there's a special reason why we were going to do it. At least it's a very personal reason for me. Kunai started in 2013, I think. So how many years ago was that, Will? 2013.
9 years.
9 years ago. So it's been 9 years, and I think it's been 5 years since we've cancelled this episode of Kunai. Let me check. I'm double checking in our show notes because we actually had to cancel a few episodes of Kunai. Don't know if you remember that, but
oh yeah,
it was in 2016. So 2016. How many years ago was 2016? Will?
6 years.
So 6 years ago, we were supposed to do an episode on Assassination Classroom, season 1. And that's going to be the next episode of Kunai. There's going to be very interesting.
Really?
Yes, we're going to do that. And I think the reason why I wanted to do that was because, well, we did Denkigai, and that was another cancelled episode. And I think we did really well with Denkigai. And considering also that I love the discussion that me and Kevin and Joe had 6 years ago, and we never recorded it, which was really odd.
Aww.
So we had to cancel that episode because we had our notes, everything was ready, and then we just canceled the episode. So what I will say is this: get excited, get hyped for As Class. And the funny thing is, I don't even have my old notes anymore, because I don't know if you guys know this, but like my room sort of like collapsed. Half my house collapsed a few years ago around that time of that recording. So basically I lost my notes, my original notes for that. So haven't seen it.
Life comes at you in funny ways.
It's weird, man.
Just like Assassination Classroom.
Just like Assassination Classroom. So next next episode will be Ass Class. We'll see you guys until then. I know that there's a lot of popularity surrounding the show. There's been an odd resurgence because it's finally made its way to Toonami. So I always see it trending. So hopefully you guys can get in on a discussion. We're going to be talking about the first season on there. Once again, I believe you can also watch it on Crunchyroll because this was originally a Funimation show, but it's made its way over to Crunchyroll. So that being said, bye.
Peace out.